Contrary to popular opinion, the Osce is really tricky, and it's not dependent on the amount of experience that you have. Your experience does not equate you passing the Osce. So today I'm going to be talking about everything Osce. If you remember the video I made a few months ago, I spoke about my experience writing the Osce and how it was very nerve-wracking for me. So I'm sure there are also other people like me that have passed through this anxiety to pass the Osce, or are about to write the Osce and they are panicking about it. I'm just going to give my 2 cents, some advice that I think will be helpful, some materials I think will be helpful for you to study, and some tips and tricks that you can use to pass your exam once. So firstly, what is Osce? Osce is objective structured clinical examination. Basically, it's a practical examination that is used to show your clinical skills and your communication skills. If you're an international nurse, how the process works is you write your IELTS or your OET, that's your English qualification examination. Then you write your CBT, that's a computer-based test from your home country. And then you come into the UK to write the Osce. The Osce is written here in the UK. There are 5 centres here in the UK where you can write the Osce. There's the Leeds Teaching University, the University of Northampton, Oxford Brookes University, Ulster University, and the Northumbria University. So these are the 5 locations where you can write the Osce. The Osce is divided into 10 stations. The first 4 stations is assessment, planning, implementation, and then your evaluation. And then we have the next 4 stations. These stations are to check your skills, clinical skills like administration of inhaled medication, aseptic non-touch technique, CSU, that's the catheter specimen, urine collection, fluid balance chart, and so on. The list is long. Then we have the last 2 skills, which is the professional values and the evidence-based practices. And you need to pass all 10 stations to be given a pass in the Osce exam. Now let's move to the price of the Osce. The Osce costs £794 here in the UK. Let's say you filled 1 to 7 stations. You would have to pay half the price the second time you are going to write the exam. And let's say you filled 8 to 10 stations, you will have to pay the full price of the exam if you fill 8 to 10 stations. Another question I have gotten often is, how many attempts do I have to write the Osce before I am sent back to my country if you're an international nurse, for example? So as far as I know, you have 3 attempts to write the exam. For me, when I came into the country, we had 8 months, and in those 8 months, we had to write our exam and we had to pass it. So if you failed the first time, you can try again the second time and the third time. If you fail the third time, I think they'll send you back to your country, unfortunately. But it's possible to write your exam the first time and pass. And even if you failed 1 station, that's okay. You can write it again and you will definitely succeed. How long it takes for you to study for the exam? From my experience, I was working and at the same time I was practicing for my exam. So I didn't really have enough time to study. But in the first 3 months when we got to the UK, we had intense training once every week. Was it once every week or 2 times every week? I can't even remember. But we had intense training for a couple of hours, I think 8 hours once every week for the first 3 months. So I think if you don't have time, 3 months will be enough for you to study for your exam. If you do have time, a month is enough. If you're going every single day back to back, you're practicing for the exam, a month is definitely enough for you to write your exam and pass successfully. So where do you get practice materials? You can either get practice materials from the NMC's official website, or you can go to the websites of the universities I listed in the beginning, and they will have past questions and practice questions for you to use for practice. I used those, and I also had a handbook which was provided by my hospital. And also, I use a lot of YouTube videos. I will be putting a list of the YouTube channels I use for my study right here, so you can go through them if you want. You have a better chance of passing this exam if you practice, and practice. That's the most important thing really in writing the Osce. If you don't have anybody to practice with, you can practice on your own. After you go on this website, look for a case scenario that you can use and just go to your room or place where you can be alone. Assume that there's an assessor watching you and then you have a patient, and just practice. Keep on practicing. That's one thing that helped me. Every single time I had an opportunity when I was not working, I was practicing, I was studying, I was making sure I was conversant with these skills. Because although you've been a nurse for so many years and you've been practicing nursing for, let's say, 5 or 10 years, the Osce is quite different because they want you to follow the skills exactly how the marking criteria is. By the way, guys, if I didn't mention, the Osce has a specific marking criteria, like literally, number 1, introduce yourself to the patient, number 2, hand washing, those kind of things. Obviously, that's not how the steps are, but they have exact steps that you need to follow for each skill and each station. So you might have the experience, but from where you're coming from, a particular skill might be done a different way than it is done here in the UK. So it is very important to go back to the marking criteria, read through it, be conversant with it, practice with the marking criteria. The station that was the hardest for me, which I mentioned in my previous video, was the implementation, where it talked about medications. And this was because I did not like anything that comes to medication. Like, I did not like pharmacology. When I was in university, I studied pharmacy for like 2 years and I hated it. I was just like, this is not for me. I can't just cram all the tablets and know the doses and know the side effects and know how they function in the body, their mechanisms and everything. It was so stressful for me. So since I knew that that was my weak point, I spent more time on the implementation. My hospital was very, very instrumental in helping me pass. Honestly, we had one of the best tutors. So he gave us a list of 100 drugs that usually come out in the Osces, and I went through those drugs one by one, learning the doses, learning the side effects, learning the mechanism, everything about each of the 100 drugs. And I know it sounds so bogus right now. How did you learn 100 drugs, Dorcas? That seems impossible, right? But it is not. Just imagine this. This is what I did, which helped me so much. I took 10 drugs every day. So 10 drugs in a day. I would make sure I study the mechanism of the drug, the dose of the drug, the side effects of each drug every single day. Let's say today I'm studying about antibiotics. I would go throughout the entire list of all the antibiotics. We had about like 10 or 15 antibiotics. I'll go through 10 antibiotics, learn the mechanisms, learn the side effects, learn the doses, and make sure I'm very conversant with these drugs. Like, if you wake me up from sleep, I know it. And then I quiz myself on those 10 drugs the next day. And then after that, I am sure that I have gotten a good understanding of those 10 drugs. The next 2 days, I pick up 10 new drugs again. I studied that, and before you know it, in a month I was done learning all 100 drugs, knowing their doses, knowing their mechanisms, knowing the side effects, and I was good to go. So guys, if you know there's a point in the Osces that is really challenging for you, spend more time in that skill, spend more time doing that procedure. I don't know if there will be any more questions really that you would have about the Osces, but if you do have any more questions about the Osces, please leave your questions in the comment down below and I will definitely answer it.